What is up, guys? I'm your friendly neighborhood web word fanatic, and due to popular demand, we are back with another rules quiz here for Marvel Champions. And a lot of you guys asked for this one, but you guys want me to do a quiz here on what is you in Marvel Champions. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. These are 4 questions I have for you. Depending on, sorry guys, Sesame just came over here. Maybe she wants to be a part of this video as well. But yeah, these are the 4 questions I have pertaining to the rule of what is you in Marvel Champions. The first question here is for any card that's worded like the Hall of Heroes right here, where it has a response and it says, after you defeat a minion, place 1 glory counter on here. Does this count if you use an ally to defeat a minion, or does it have to be your identity? The second question here is going to be pertaining to cards like the Armored Guard or the Kree Commando, who have Patrol right here. So while this minion is engaged with you, you cannot thwart the main scheme. And then the Armored Guard has Guard. While this minion is engaged with you, you cannot attack the villain. Is this only pertaining to you, as in your hero / your identity, or does it also include allies, right? Can your allies attack the villain if you're engaged with the Guard minion? And can your allies, thwart the main scheme if you're engaged with a Patrol minion? The third question that I have for you guys is going to be regarding villains that have a force response like Magneto, for example, where he says after Magneto attacks you, place 1 mana counter on main scheme. So after Magneto attacks you, like the identity, do you place a mana counter in the main scheme only in that situation? Or does Magneto also place a mana counter after he attacks one of your allies? Does your ally, in this situation count as an extension of you if your ally exhausts to chump block and defend the attack from Magneto? And then finally, my fourth question for you guys is for a villain like the Sinister Six here with Doc Ock. He has a force response here that's a little bit different than Magneto's. After Doc Ock attacks and damages you, place 1 threat on each scheme, and then you move the active counter to the next villain in the activation order. So this was not just after Doc Ock activates against you, it's after Doc Ock attacks and damages you. So my question here is, does this force response also trigger after Doc Ock attacks and damages one of your allies, right? So my question here is, for all these 4 extensions of you, does an ally apply as a part of you? And the answer is going to be a little bit mixed for some of them here. So pause the video right here, guys, and let me know down in the comments what you think the answers are for these 4 questions. Don't look it up, and we'll see if you guys got these correct. Okay, so I'm hoping you guys already answered. Let's go ahead and jump into the answers here. So for the first question here, for Hall of Heroes, any effect that's similar to Hall of Heroes, where you have to defeat a minion to trigger that effect, this only applies for your identity. If you answer that allies cannot trigger the effect of a card like Hall of Heroes, then you got it correct. So this effect right here, the definition of you, only pertains to your hero or your identity, right? So if your ally defeats a minion, you cannot trigger this effect and place a glory counter on Hall of Heroes. I do also want to clarify that supports like a tag team, for example, also classifies as not a part of you, right? Because this support card right here, right? This is the tag team taking down a minion. So if you exhaust the tag team, remove a counter to deal 2 damage to enemy, and this finishes off a minion, you will not get a glory counter on Hall of Heroes. However, if you have like an event or an upgrade, these are all extensions of you. So basically, if you use your basic activation, like your basic attack, you exhaust your identity to attack and defeat a minion, you can trigger the response from this. If you play an attack event, like for example, Haymaker, hero action attack, do 3 damage to enemy, and that defeats a minion, you can also trigger the response from Hall of Heroes. Also, if you have an upgrade that defeats an enemy, that also counts as an extension of your hero and will be able to get you that counter from defeating a minion. So question number 2 here is going to be in regards to the guard anti-patrol minions right here. If you answer that allies does count as a part of you, for this situation, then you answered it correctly. Because basically your allies also cannot thwart the main scheme if you're engaged with the Kree Commando, and your allies cannot attack the villain if you're engaged with the guard minion like the Armored Guard here. This one can definitely be very confusing here, especially for newer players, because it says here, while this minion is engaged with you, you cannot attack the villain. So it does seem like with the wording that your allies should be able to attack the villain. And then same for the patrol minion here, while this minion is engaged with you, you cannot thwart the main scheme. So it seems like your ally is not you, so your ally should be able to thwart the main scheme. But we can see right here in the rules reference for 1.6, it says for like the guard keyword right here, while a minion with the guard keyword is engaged with a player, that player cannot use cards they control to attack a villain without this keyword. So any card that you control cannot attack the villain with this keyword. And then same for patrol right here. While a minion with the patrol keyword is engaged with the player, that player cannot use cards that they control to thwart the main scheme. One thing to note with this is that, this does include your allies and your identity, so you cannot thwart the main scheme if you are engaged with a patrolman like the Kree Commando, and you cannot attack the villain if you are, engaged with a guardman like the Armored Guard. Not only does this mean that your identity cannot, use your basic attack to attack the villain, but also like for the first question, if you're playing an attack event like Haymaker, or if you're using an upgrade, that's also an extension of your hero. So if you're engaged with this Armored Guard, you will not be able to play attack events or use upgrades that attack and damage the villain. Same thing with a patrolman, you cannot play thwart events or use upgrades that have that thwart word right there to thwart the main scheme if you're engaged with the Kree Commando. But just like with the first question, tag team is an exception to this, but for a completely different reason than for the first question. So tag team here is support. Exhaust tag team and remove one counter from it to deal 2 damage to an enemy. Well, the reason why this kind of bypasses a guardman here and you can still use tag team to deal damage to the villain is not because it's a support, right? Because you still can't use cards that you control to attack the villain. But tag team is not an attack because it does not have that attack word right there, like the Haymaker here, for example, that says attack, right? So you can play a tag team and then use the tag team, remove a counter from it, deals 2 damage to the villain, even though you are engaged with an armor guard. And then same thing for the patrolman, like the Kree Commando. If you have like a surveillance team here, this does not count as a thwart activation because it doesn't have the thwart right there. So this 2-cost support, as an action, you can exhaust it, remove a snoop counter, and remove 1 threat from the main scheme if you choose, even if you are engaged with the Kree Commando. So this will bypass the patrol right here, even though normally your allies and your thwart events cannot bypass patrol. The thing to keep note is that it's not that because the surveillance team is a support, it's because the surveillance team is not a thwart. That's the main thing to note. Usually supports does not count as the hero thwarting. I do also want to make a note that says here that, you cannot thwart the main scheme. Your allies cannot thwart the main scheme. However, your allies can remove threat from the main scheme if it does it with its effect. Like Beak here, for example, he's a 2-cost ally, 1 thwart, 1 attack, 2 hit points. As a response, after you play Beak from your hand, remove 1 threat from a scheme for each X-Men ally you control. Well, at minimum, when you're playing Beak, he is an X-Men ally himself, so he can remove 1 threat from any scheme, and you can choose the main scheme even if you're engaged with the Kree Commander, which has Patrol, because you're not thwarting the main scheme with Beak, you're using his ability to remove 1 threat from the main scheme if you choose so. So Beak can use the response right here to remove threat from the main scheme. He just can't exhaust and use his thwart stat to remove threat from the main scheme. Let's move on to question number 3 here, which is going to pertain to all effects similar to Magneto's force response here. This could be through an attachment or through another villain having a similar effect, where it would say something like after X villain activates or attacks you, do X effect, like place 1 mana counter on the main scheme. So after Magneto attacks you, you'll place a mana counter on the main scheme. If Magneto attacks you and you exhaust an ally to defend that attack and Magneto defeats the ally, you will still place a mana counter on a main scheme because this effect right here where it says after Magneto attacks you, regards to like you as in like the player, after he attacks anything on your side of the field, like any character you control or anything like that, you still have to place a mana counter on a main scheme. This effect basically cannot be negated unless Magneto does not attack, right? So if you have like a tough stats card, it doesn't matter if you fully defend the attack, don't take any damage, none of that matters. As long as Magneto attacks you, he is going to place a mana counter on main scheme. One way to bypass this is if you can cancel his attack activation, like with a stun stash or something like that. He does have steady though, so you might need 2 stun statuses to block that out. But basically, that's the only way to prevent this force response here from going off. So Magneto is always going to place a bunch of mana counters on a main scheme, and that's definitely something to be worried about when you're facing this villain. Some villains will have a force response after they activate against you, so whether they scheme or attack, but Magneto is only after he attacks you, so if you are an alter ego and then Magneto schemes, he's not going to place a mana counter on the main scheme. Let's move on to the 4th and final question here for an effect like Doc Ock here, where he says after Doc Ock attacks and damages you, place 1 threat on each scheme, and then you move the active counter to the next villain in the activation order. So this effect here works differently than Magneto's because of the word damage here. that damage only applies to you as in your hero or your identity. So in order for Doc Ock to trigger this effect right here to place one threat on each scheme and then move the active counter, he has to not only attack, but he has to also damage you. So if you have like a tough status card, Doc attacks you, but then he never damaged you because the tough prevented that damage. So you don't have to trigger this force response right here. If Doc attacks you and you exhaust an ally to chump block the attack, Doc damages and defeats the ally. That does not count as damaging you, so you do not have to trigger the force response here and place a threat on each scheme and move the active counter. So basically, as long as you prevent the damage from the attack on you, then you're fine. Whether the ally takes attack or whether your defense stat or like a tough status or something else prevents that damage, like a backflip from Spider-Man can also prevent that damage. If you don't take any damage here from Doc Ock, he won't trigger this response. For any affected Marvel champions that says it damages you, this only applies to you as in your identity or your hero. It does not count as damaging an ally you control. I do want to make a specific note that the wording is very important in Marvel Champions because a card like Claw's Vengeance here will also work differently. So when reviewed in hero form, Claw attacks you. If this attack deals damage, place one threat on the main scheme. So since this card does not say if this attack deals damage to your hero, even if you chump block with the ally and Claw's attack here deals damage to your ally and he does no damage to your hero, he's still going to place a threat on the main scheme because the attack dealt damage, right? So it's super important to like make sure that you read every single card very carefully because different cards can have different effects depending on exactly what it says. There is going to be a little bit of inconsistency here or there with the exact wording for cards, but for cards that are worded exactly this way, then it will count for like dealing damage to any ally. For cards like this that are worded exactly like this, where it says damages you, this only applies to you as in your identity or hero. All right, that wraps up this video and another rules quiz. Let me know down in the comments how many questions did you guys get right. Did you guys get 100% score here? I know tons of you guys got all the questions right for the last rules quiz. I hope you guys like this one. I'll see you guys all in the next video.